In 2003, the production company Billionfold Incorporated was founded, and besides having the most narcissistic mascot in branding history, is perhaps best known for producing 4 cartoons for Nickelodeon. But for a company that prides itself on Christian values, family-friendly experiences, and the American dream, isn't it ironic that perhaps their most acclaimed animated series is about undead spirits and high school? He's a phantom. For as long as it's been around, Danny Phantom has been touted as the very best of the Billionfold 4, the magnum opus of its history. Even before the Fairly OddParents jumped the shark, it was by and large considered a warm-up to this, a serialized action comedy with memorable story arcs, characters, comedy, and themes. Though like any sophomore follow-up in a long lineage, whether or not it's still the best for that lineage is contested. Is this still the peak, or did the decline start here and we just didn't know at the time? You can probably tell from the title of this review I've got some complaints, and I'll be more than happy to get into them once a better understanding of Danny Phantom's history is made clear. As soon as the Fairly OddParents became a massive success for Nickelodeon, its creator, some schmuck named Edgar, was asked to make an action cartoon for boys. Before he could even give a name to his idea of a ghost hunting family, it was greenlit. Much of the team for Fairly OddParents was brought on to develop this new show. Same creator, same writers, same art designers, same composer, same thing in the intro where it goes into the eye. But ask any fan of Danny Phantom what made the show so great, and they'll usually answer Steve Marmel, a staff writer usually credited for making the story we know today, or possibly the character designer Steven Silver, who took these gaudy sketches and made something cute out of them. Things couldn't be better when Danny Phantom premiered on Nick on April 3rd, 2004. The same staff had 2 overnight successes on their hands, dedicated to providing different hilarious stories to different eager groups. Danny Phantom in particular gained a strong cult following amongst teenagers, a demographic NickToons didn't really lean into for the longest time. What could possibly go wrong? Someone in production has made the assumption that once Avatar: The Last Airbender hit the scene in 2005, that it toppled Danny Phantom from its pedestal and hurt its momentum. That same person overtook creative control of the show in the 3rd and final season, which the fanbase unanimously agrees to be the worst. Its cancellation was announced on January 24th, 2006, though it didn't properly end until August 24th, 2007. It's rumored that another reason the show got so rough in season 3, and the episode count was nearly halved, is that this certain someone overspent on stunt voice actors, animation services, and TV movies, but this hasn't been confirmed or denied. Bumpy ending aside, Danny Phantom is still considered the best quality show to come out of Billionfold, with longtime fans still clamoring for a continuation of some sort. But is it because the show had an excellent world that they want to see more of, or that it was promising yet unfulfilling?
So, Danny, you and your little friends want to hunt ghosts.
Actually, Dad, I want to be an astronaut.
14-year-old Danny Fenton is an average kid that some people understand and some people don't. His parents are self-employed ghost hunters, his sister Jazz is the best character in the series, and his best friends are a goth girl and a black techno geek boy, your constant reminders that this show was made in the mid-2000s. Danny does have one special property. Due to a freak accident with a ghost portal at home, his molecules got all rearranged, and now he can transform into a half-ghost, or a halfer, and fight off the evil ones. Or even catch 'em all, depending on whether you're like, Edgar, are we allowed to use that slogan? Despite how awesome this power is, he wants to keep it a secret between him and his friends for many reasons, which pile up over time. So we've got us a double life storyline, with continuity between most episodes, and larger stories about teen life through the lens of supernatural predicaments. What Steve Marmel and all the talented crew members were able to accomplish was making a coming-of-age story with relatable characters, juxtaposed with sci-fi adventures that form the basis of their developments, taking narrative influence from Silver Age comic books, especially Spider-Man. And for a larger portion of the show's run, It managed to accomplish this successfully, offering twists, turns, trials, and tribulations that allowed each episode to offer something to the rest of the larger narrative, no matter how small. Our main boy, Danny Fenton, is your run-of-the-mill teen superhero, loser by day, butt whooper by night. At least after he gets comfortable with his expanding array of ghostly powers. That said, he's always rather apprehensive about how others would perceive his choices, preferring to keep a low profile even in his school life. It's clear he's got a stressful life, but he's not really one to lash out and make a scene, and he knows it's best to save the day whenever he can. His best female friend is Sam Manson, a goth girl who loves vegetarian meals and social crusades. I know she's got a fair amount of critics. Her personality is very intertwined with her interests rather than her thoughts and feelings, but I didn't mind her that much. She can provide a level-headed perspective for the trio a lot of the time, and I don't mean to get into shipping, but this is not a pair-up I'm salty about. Rounding out this team is Tucker Foley, a meat-loving techno-geek who more often than not functions as the comic relief, or at least tonal relief. I mean, the heaviest his problems get is feeling unimportant, which is perfectly normal for teenagers. I like him, he certainly adds something useful to the group, and can bounce off Sam as an ally or adversary depending on the situation. Oh boy, Danny's parents. Jack Fenton is Billy and Fold's second dumb dad in a row, and really not a whole lot more unique. Sure, they give him his moments, but I don't find him charming enough to feel like he adds anything good to this world. Especially for his wife Maddie, who loves him unconditionally, despite how much of a dunce he can be. And the main reason for this is the alternative is a lot worse. That's fun. Loving mother and competent ghost catcher and all, but there's gotta be someone in Amity Park in her league. I've already said this, but Danny's sister Jasmine is my favourite character on the show. While a bit nosy and all too quick to think she's already an adult, you can tell she cares about Danny and wants him to be a happy and successful kid. She's a good older sister, but still an older sister. Moving into the denizens of Casper High, get it? Dash is the school bully who picks on Danny for being a wimp. There are things about him I could do without, especially the voice, and they whip him out too many times for him to have real weight. But there are times where you see a meeker side of him, so that's all well and good. Danny has a crush on Paulina, a girl I thought was voiced by the Colombian woman from Modern Family, but was actually voiced by the mother from Wizards of Waverly Place, who's obsessed with being pretty, and that's about it. If you liked Trixie from The Fairly OddParents, she's a Latina now. Valerie is the daughter of a rich scientist whose life has been ruined by Danny Phantom's misadventures, so she vows vengeance and sets out to destroy him, unaware that Phantom is Fenton. With a lot of these stories, you simply have to buy that no one's able to tell these two apart, but Valerie is a fairly strong, competent adversary. Now we're getting into those. They mostly come from the Ghost Zone, which is usually accessed by a portal in the Fenton's basement. But there is someone else with such a portal, the main villain of the series, Vlad Plasmius, a multi-millionaire who went to college with Jack and Maddie and hates the former for taking the latter from him. If being unable to move on from college isn't creepy enough, he's also a half-ghost and uses his powers for evil. He's the kind of villain this show needed, and thankfully he's not all show, no go. He does have his sinister moments. A close second for main villain is Skulker, a bounty hunter who wants Danny to be his. I feel like it's mandatory that if Kevin Michael Richardson's playing a villain, that they make him edgy and dangerous, then eventually turn him into more of a joke adversary. Danny Phantom isn't exactly known for defying cliches, so I can forgive that. There's a bunch of other memorable villains, the most memorable of which being Ember, the living spirit of a teen rock star whose music can control the world literally. They can get a lot of mileage out of her being a rock star to say some things about music in general, and her song is the most evil of earworms, it works so well. Desiree is an evil genie woman, a nice twist on an old mythical creature. Spectra is a ghost that pretends to be a really bad school teacher so she can steal children's good feelings. Love her for so many reasons. She has a faithful assistant, Bertrand, who's a faithful assistant at least. and I'm sure the box ghost needs no introduction. Just beware of him, okay? There's a ton of other noteworthy foes, like Johnny 13, the sleazy dude ghost, Youngblood, who can only be seen by kids, Technus, voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, and it surprisingly fits, and Freak Show, who does his best to elevate the gothic undertones of the show. I'm sure you'll have your own favourites. Last of all, the ones I want to bring up, Clockwork, the Overseer of Time, isn't really a villain, more of a neutral party to everything that'll ever happen, but he's still a chilling and compelling character that seriously elevates the best of the TV movies. I like my villains distinct and threatening in unique ways, and this show at its best could deliver. But what do I mean at its best?
I don't know what to say. Oh wait, yes I do. These things are stupid.
Well, there are a couple problems with Danny Phantom that I find hard to get over. The big one being how similar it is to the Fairly OddParents in many ways. And I don't mean it's another cartoon about a boy with unkempt hair having access to a fantastical world and needing to keep it a secret from almost everyone he knows in real life. The more that blueprint repeats, the more it differs. I mean the way the stories and jokes are told, and how it all looks and feels, doesn't feel like enough of an evolution from its predecessor / concurrent sister show. Again, there are differences, but they share too much DNA for it to really feel like the Billionfold team is evolving. Compared to Cartoon Network, where creators over there were starting to make their own second shows. It's not easy to believe that Gendy Tartakovsky created both Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack, and as much as I don't like Foster's Home, Craig McCracken made sure it wasn't Powerpuff Girls 2.0. These guys made their shows several years after the older ones too, while Danny Phantom's creator began developing it while season 2 of The Fairly OddParents was still in production. I think if the writers let The Fairly OddParents end early, God forbid, then went to work on Danny Phantom right after production wrapped, they'd be more willing to stretch their muscles and create a more unique series. But with all that noted, being uber different isn't what Danny Phantom set out to do. That should be clear by it being a very traditional teen superhero story. The most it does to differentiate itself from the norm is by whipping out the usual Billionfold tropes, like subversive humor and cheesy gags. Not a lot of shouting though. The voice acting is quirky, but not as cartoonish as before. Stylistically, another small difference is with the music. Guy Moon is the composer once again, and while his approaches to background and jingle composition haven't changed, the instruments certainly have. The Fairly OddParents had big band music, and Danny Phantom is more electronic with the occasional rock tune. The animation style and design work of the former show is also heavily borrowed, but again, manages to add little accents here and there. For one, the colours of Amity Park are usually a little dull, whereas Ghosts and the Ghost Zone are very saturated, providing a clear contrast and letting you know which is more normal and which is more exciting. Overall, the colour palette is much darker, but makes up for it with more intense use of lighting and shading effects, which I think best fit this story and made it stick out, compared to when they employed these effects on the Fairly OddParents when it was revived. It didn't look right. And for an action show by a recently established animation studio, the fight scenes look really dang good, and they're never afraid to try a cool camera effect or push for a surreal feeling.
What's going on? You passed out. We took you home. You've been asleep for 4 days. 4 days?
Nah, it's only been a couple hours.
The show kicks off shortly after Danny gets his powers, as explained in the rap song that I love, but I would have preferred the prototype theme song. But since the one we got already does a good enough job explaining the show, we don't get an origin story until next season. You're thrust into the teen angst headfirst. Fenton still has to deal with family drama and trouble at school, while understanding his newfound abilities and facing off against dangerous ghosts and making Amity Park a safer place. He does that well for a while, but eventually Phantom's noticed by the media and framed as the real bad guy. Before that, a few people catch on to Danny's double life, Sam, Tucker, and Jazz, and Valerie's convinced by Vlad that this ghost boy that destroyed her father's lab is evil. The stakes raise at a natural pace as more responsibilities and conflicts are pushed onto Danny and his friends. Natural for the lives of any 14-year-old, I guess. Like any Season 1, a lot of the developments are setups rather than payoffs. Despite clearly being an action show, It didn't stray away from more down-to-earth struggles like failing an exam or freeing a gorilla from captivity. While these problems aren't always juxtaposed with the supernatural elements, they help in making a more relatable show if the ghost stories aren't what you come in for whatever reason. Despite all the tension here, Season 1 is pretty softball compared to the later ones.
I know! How about this?
Young Danny thought quickly and picked up an orange. He threw it at Walker who... Ah, crud! Nothing rhymes with orange!
Season 2 dramatically toned down the slice-of-life elements and took the show in a more dramatic, action-heavy direction. Perhaps one of the biggest evolutions is that Danny Phantom's suit now has an emblem on it. It all seemed kind of empty before then. The characters deal with more turmoil, their lives put on the line more often as they get forced into bigger, or in one case smaller, situations. This was the clear direction to go in, and for the most part it makes it my favourite season of the show. They're really unwrapping all the potential they'd built up, and made a show that didn't just talk about teen angst, but talked to it. Simple mishaps and choices of words can often lead to grave situations, especially in the TV movies they made this year. Rainstorm, The Ultimate Enemy, and Reality Trip. Believe me, I'm talking about all of these in the best episode segment, but they have all the fun they can raising the stakes and bringing as many characters and ideas together as they can. I also saw a lot of potential in Danielle Phantom, a failed clone of Danny's made by Vlad. She's a cool idea for a character, and both her episodes are good, but that's only 2 episodes. They could have used her more. But that's not the only disappointing thing about this season. While the development of Danny knowing about Jazz, knowing about his double life is nice, the recent development of her opening up to her inner child isn't as well realized, or half as useful. A couple nagging issues start popping up as the season ends, and while it doesn't stop this from being a pretty good season at large, it's a clear prelude to the terror of Season 3.
Which reminds me, you ever thought of supersizing those Vladdy meals?
No, for the love of...
The 3 biggest differences between Season 3 and the first 2 are as follows. 3. The season was shortened to 13 episodes rather than the previously standard 20, possibly due to the rumoured overspending, but possibly due to Nick's shifting priorities. 2. The departure of Steve Marmel as head writer, who'd go on to create Sunny with a Chance. Obvious jump. And 1. Not being good. The biggest change the new guy wanted to shoehorn in as soon as possible was that Vlad Plasmius would now run for mayor and win in a landslide. I don't mean to oppress the views of the straight, white, neurotypical, upper-middle-class, North American, conservative, Christian male Gen Xer, but I'll just say his political satire is pretty tone-deaf. Not to mention, a lot of the earlier arcs, like Valerie fighting Phantom and Jazz joining the group, got stripped down or ignored by the end, especially all the pressure about Danny needing to keep his ghost powers a secret, but I'll get to that eventually. Season 3 preferred to create more episodic episodes, a majority of the problems here being more self-contained, less emotional, and relatively worthless. And the finale they settled on felt very rushed, more in the context of the show than as its own thing. But I'll get to that TV movie too after I run through the great stuff. Of course I was going to pick 13 highlights. Starting with Destabilized, the best Season 3 had to offer. This is the last we really see of Danielle Phantom, and there's an irony to it being about her almost dying. Being an imperfect clone, she's starting to melt. This is dark, this is intense, this is what I wanted Season 3 to be more like. Teacher of the Year takes a look at how Danny's grades have been affected by video games and saving the world, and serves as a closer look at his teacher, Mr. Lancer. He's a stern, sometimes scary teacher, but a teacher all the same. The rest of this is mostly power mad again, but that's a bonus. Fanning the Flames is the reason people love Ember so much. A ghostly rock star who hypnotizes her fans into loving her music, their cheers powering her up. A cool design is one thing, but giving a villain a motivation, strength, weakness, and kick-ass soundtrack are vital ingredients to making them, for lack of a better word, memorable. The Fright Before Christmas tells the story of Danny getting annoyed by all the holiday cheer surrounding him, and a ghost called Ghostwriter doesn't make it any easier when he forces him into a Christmas poem until he changes his ways. It's not a holiday lock for me, but it's really fun and really sweet at the same time. Bitter Reunions is just a classic, the grand debut of Danny's arch-foe, Vlad Plasmius. Oddly enough, it's never explained why he looks like a vampire. They left that idea on the cutting room floor, mainly because the story did everything it needed to do to make him a cunning, intimidating foe. Rainstorm kicks off a very strong string of TV movies for Season 2, and keeps the show's strong ride of medieval ghosts chugging. This battle against Pariah Dark, where Danny whips out as many ghost powers as he can, including new ones, against this endless swarm of knights, is just epic. Control Freaks was the introduction to Freak Show, one of my favourite villains, and he knocks it out of the park with the creepy circus plot and non-stop chills and thrills. And it also laid a foundation for the two best TV movies, so it's got that going for it as well. Reality Trip may not be the most dramatic of the movies, but it's far and away the most fun. It offers this far-out what-if scenario of Danny's secret being revealed to the world, a cross-country road trip for stones for what is essentially the Infinity Gauntlet, and Freak Show warping reality as much as he can into a demented amusement park. Clowns and amusement parks, they always go so well together, as do road trips and long-form specials. Fright Night combines Danny Phantom and Halloween. How could it not be a gem? Danny and Dash each have to design a haunted house attraction, and Danny has a little idea that creates big trouble. As you can see, my preference in the series usually lies in how an episode feels, but this one has a dang good villain and Bashel. I can't gloss over that. Memory Blank pushed Danny and Sam's relationship as far as it could go, and just when you think it's over, they go even further by erasing Danny's ghost life. Things have changed for the better, and this episode does everything it can to show that, as well as giving Danny Phantom a snazzy new logo. Nice. The ultimate enemy is the big epic, and to many people, the peak of the show. It's a quintessential showcase of how the series deals with adolescent angst. If Danny cheats on this upcoming test, he's gonna become the most evil ghost of all time. A bit of a stretch, I know, but the lengths they go to ensure Danny will know better by the end are thoughtful. My brother's keeper just sticks with me, you know? Spectra can't be a better villain if she tried, and her debut couldn't be more perfect for a teen action series. Furthermore, this set a pretty high precedent to how the story will go from here on out. On top of all of that, it's just a sweet episode about a sister looking out for her little bro. It all comes together beautifully. My favourite episode of all would be Doctor's Disorders though. Spectra's back, and the students of Casper High are now getting ghost powers of their own after getting bitten by ghost bugs. So they're sent to an old rundown hospital where Spectra plans to steal all their DNA for the perfect body. This is far and away their most atmospheric romp, pleasing me with its gothic imagery counterbalanced with the creative ghost powers and fear factor of all these kids never leaving here with their youth intact. It's quintessential Danny Phantom, quintessential gothic horror, quintessential 2000s action comedy, and quintessential way better than these bottom 10. 13 is a perfect recipe of fine enough but with several nagging issues. Having Johnny 13 and Kitty bicker all the time was not a fun way to introduce me to their dynamic, and I don't think Jazz would like a jacket like Kitty's, and that's the crux of the story. I think if the new characters were a little more conceived and the jacket was a bit differently designed, this would be better. Eye for an Eye introduced us to the wacky world of Mayor Plasmius. The increased surveillance stuff isn't brought up again after this, though they make sure the whole Mayor plot point's never forgotten, and Jack Fenton's blind faith in Vlad is getting out of hand. I know this is what your country's really like with politics, but get real. Beauty Mark brings the golden age of medieval episodes to a screeching halt. I'm sure for some people this is an empowering tale of a dragon princess ghost standing up for herself thanks to Sam, but the beauty pageant and castle setting clash, and it hammers in the stand up for what you believe in message a little too hard for a character who always stands up for what she believes in. Phantom Planet rushes as many finale cliches out the door as it can, the hero giving up their powers, a world-ending crisis ensuing, and the hero having to reveal themselves to the world for it to end, and everyone automatically being okay with it. It makes all the turmoil in this show seem like it was for naught, and while there's a little attempt at giving a big send-off, it's really sad knowing the last real Danny Phantom story in 14 years is a wet band-aid. Prisoners of Love is one of my least favorite kinds of episode, the marriage crisis episode, and it's episode 8. Maybe a bit too early to drop this kind of story, especially since it doesn't mean anything in the end. Life Lessons is your place to be if you really like crying baby sound effects. Casper High's given baby dolls to look after, and I'm really concerned with how bad some of them are being treated. Sam and Tuck are a broken home in the making. There is some time to think for Danny Phantom and Valerie when they're cuffed together, but they make sure it's just for this one time. Sure. Double Cross My Heart was my least favorite of the romance stories. Some of them were totally fine, others made the characters jerks just so we could have a story, and Greg is revealed to be a phony in the end. I'm not a shipper, but I'm sure these episodes are either a lot better or a lot worse for these communities. King Tuck is an episode I don't like, that reminds me of a Futurama episode I don't like, both based around a culture and mythology I really like. I'm so lucky. Especially with Tuck, the leap from feeling lonely and out of the picture to becoming a ruthless pharaoh was very hard to justify, and they didn't really do it. I like some of the stuff they do here, but not the story. LIVIN Large doesn't have much going for it aside from a very stock, overdone conflict. Vlad makes the Fentons rich, and Danny doesn't care about his missions or friends anymore so long as he's got a luxurious room and high-definition video games. Like any rags to riches to rags story, this can work, but they don't put the effort in here, making it come off as an arbitrary box tick. We got the rich episode out of the way, let's move on. And Forever Phantom took shapeshifting and made it not fun. Some of the shapeshifting gags with a Morpho are alright, but it all leads to the wackiest of misconstructions and the dumbest Danny's parents ever act. It was an indicator to me that the man in charge of all of Billionfold's projects was caring less about suspension of disbelief and more about cheap laughs and characters that were walking jokes. No disrespect to anyone else who worked on the show, other than the creator of course. It all comes around to the underlying thought I've presented. I like Danny Phantom, but it's very flawed. Now I like a lot of shows that have obvious flaws, but this show has one for everything it does super well. Engaging characters with romantic plot tumors, a great story that weakened over time, some really good jokes and some really lame ones. Nice animation, derivative animation. It's difficult to pin Danny Phantom's greatness weaknesses on one thing. Part executive meddling, part a creator that doesn't know what his team's trying to accomplish, part that team being overly ambitious. Maybe if none of that was an issue, it would be a better show and have a bigger cult following. But as it is, I'd personally consider it a weaker show than classic Fairly Odd Parents. Mostly because that was its own thing, and this one tends to be making a ghost story in the Fairly Odd Parents style. However, there are things in this show that I absolutely do love, as previously stated. And at the end of the day, I think I'm gonna remember the good things more. It's more about the journey than the destination anyway. I may not be going ghost again in the near future, but I'd be happy to support those who have, and continue to do so. Goodbye for now.
For this crew, playtime is serious business.
You're going down.
That recess bell's ringing. Coming up next on Disney's One Saturday Morning.
Now let's do it!
Young Danny Phantom, he was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine.